Advanced care planning is one of the most important ways to ensure the wishes of a loved one or wishes of our own are honored in our final days or instances where we can't speak for ourselves. It can be a tough conversation to have, but that doesn't make it any less critical to take care of. In this episode of Being Well, Carle's Teresa Riegle will walk us through the steps of advanced care planning.
When Sarah Bush Lincoln opened in 1977, it was with the promise to serve the community's healthcare needs. It has grown into a 2-hospital system with nearly 60 clinics that provide trusted, compassionate care.
For over 50 years, Horizon Health has been keeping you and your family healthy. And although some things have changed, Horizon Health's commitment to meet the ever-changing needs of our community has remained the same. Horizon Health, 50 years strong.
Carle is redefining healthcare around you, innovating new solutions and offering all levels of care when and where you need it. Investing in technology and research to optimize healthcare, Carle, with Health Alliance, is always at the forefront to help you thrive.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Being Well. I'm your host, Lacey Spence, and today we are welcoming another new guest to our show. Today we've got Teresa Riegle from Carle. Welcome to Being Well.
Thanks so much.
Of course. And so I like to let our guests get acquainted with our viewers and so forth. And so can you tell me and our viewers a little bit about yourself?
I am a nurse. I've been a nurse for 42 years. I work at Carle at Mattoon Clinic as an outpatient care coordinator. I've had a variety of roles, but as part of that, we have facilitators who do advanced care planning with patients, and that's one of my roles.
Yeah. Did you have more to add? I'm sorry.
No, that's
okay. I just want to make sure I give you the floor. And so you mentioned advanced care planning, and that is our topic of choice today. Sometimes it can be a difficult conversation to have. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that a little bit? How you kind of bring that up with people?
Well, one of the things we do with our patients is an ongoing assessment to kind of find out where their needs are and how we can meet them. And part of that is advanced care planning. And so we review with the patients, we review their chart and see what's available, because with the electronic medical record, a patient is actually able to complete the healthcare power of attorney form, and then we can scan it into their chart. They can do that at Carle, at Sarah Bush. Any of the healthcare systems have that accessibility. The key there is that it's quickly available to those people that are in a critical or emergent situation. So I do that, and then we did a big initiative at Carle several years ago to encourage patients to have advanced care plans. To think about what choices they would make and who they would want making the decisions if they were in a situation and then they could not do that themselves. And so we had special training to really be able to talk with the patient about thinking about what they would want in an emergent or critical situation when they could not make the decisions themselves, and who they would want making the decision for them. So we went to that training, and then as part of meeting, we have those facilitators available at each clinic, along with social workers and people at the main hospital. And I do that. I rotate as part of one of those facilitators, and I talk with my group of patients regularly about their healthcare power of attorney and their advanced care plans.
And so with advanced care planning, I think you were telling me that this is a somewhat newer initiative at Carle. Can you talk about that?
I can't, it has been a focus in the last, between 5 and 10 years. I can't give an exact number, I apologize. But Carle decided that really to give patients information and encourage them to think about who would be the decision maker if that patient could not make the decision themselves. If they were an emergent, say they'd had a big stroke or they were in a big car accident in the emergency room and could not speak for themselves, who would make the decisions, and then what kind of decisions they would make. Do they want life prolonged at all cost, or do they prefer not to have life prolonged and just be allowed to pass away?
Yeah. And so that's definitely one of what, I really just generally, what is advanced care planning for maybe someone who's never even heard the term?
Advanced care planning is first thinking about those critical situations, thinking about those end-of-life decisions, quality versus quantity of life. Do you want your life prolonged at all cost, or do you prefer just to be allowed to pass away? And the second part of that is completing a healthcare power of attorney and completing a living will, which actually is a document that tells your family and your friends who you would want making the decisions and what decisions you would want them to make. Part of the key there is choosing people who can abide by your wishes or follow up with what you would want if you were in that critical situation.
Yeah, so let's talk about trying to discover who that person should be. You were telling me a little bit earlier that it needs to be somebody that you can trust to not maybe go after what their heart would feel, but to definitely respect what the patient is after.
Well, one of the keys, I think, is having these decisions, having these discussions with your family or with your friends in a non-threatening situation. One of the ideas is holiday dinners, not that you want to talk about critical situations, but when your family's together and everyone's relaxed and having a good time, people can talk a little bit more honestly with each other and express what their thoughts. The beginning of that is really thinking about what you would want and then expressing that to the key people. Choosing those people who are able to make those decisions that are important to you. Someone in a critical situation in the emergency room, and I've seen this a multitude of times, people are very stressed out and very emotional, and that's not a time when people can make good decisions. Mm-hmm. That's why advanced care planning, pre-planning what decisions you want them to make is so important.
And so the person you choose, is that when they get the title of power of attorney, or is that something different?
This is a healthcare power of attorney.
Okay.
A power of attorney is a legal document that they can make financial decisions.
Okay.
But this is a healthcare document only. Healthcare power of attorney, or power of attorney for healthcare, is actually the new terminology. And so they can be involved in your care, make decisions, and you choose actually when that begins. For maybe a family that the parent is having some dementia or memory issues, they may choose for their son or daughter to be involved starting now, or they may want to control that decision making until they're in a situation when they cannot make those decisions. And the form actually delineates when you would want that person to be able to make decisions for you.
Okay. And you were also telling me that it doesn't have to be the same person or relation, I guess, for everyone.
Right.
Can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Well, a couple of the delineations, I guess, is if a person would come into the emergency room and be in a critical situation where they couldn't speak for themselves, actually the state of Illinois has what's called the Surrogate Act, and so literally by your blood relations, then there's an actually defined list who those people that can speak for you default to. But if you have your power of attorney for health care, mm-hmm. then that actually delineates and would override that Healthcare Surrogate Act. So maybe you might have a son, you might have a spouse, but your son is able to actually carry out your wishes where your husband or your spouse isn't, then that might be the first person that you want to be the decision maker for you. Because you want the person that knows your wishes and is going to support that when you can't speak.
And so you were showing me that there are several documents that Carle provides. Can you kind of walk us through or talk about what those documents are and how important it is, again, to have that physical copy of here's what I want when you can't physically say it?
Sure. There are two primary documents. One is the power of attorney for health care, and that actually delineates who your agent would be, who you would want speaking for you if you couldn't speak for yourself. As part of that document also, it goes through those choices of quality versus quantity of life and ask you to choose what is more important, quantity of life or quality of life, and list out things that might be important. Talks about feeding tubes or CPR or ventilators. And so you can choose. The secret is that you think about that before you sign the form. Right. What's important to you? And then actually we ask if the patient's able to complete that themselves as much as possible and to sign it. But then they have to have a witness who is not a family member, who has no financial obligation to them. So we have people at Carle, your banker, your insurance, your neighbor, somebody saying that they saw you sign this. That's what's important. And there's a second document that's called a living will, and that actually is a documentation that says, I truly do not want to be resuscitated. If my body stops, I don't want you to start it again. And so there are two forms that you can choose to sign. The healthcare or power of attorney for healthcare is the most important because that delineates who you want making decisions. The living will is a second adjunct of whether you want resuscitation or not.
So within all of this, I know you'd mentioned earlier talking about the power of attorney, and that's more financial outside of the healthcare realm. And then you've got the healthcare power of attorney. All of this with using the word attorney. Does any of this require like legal assistance for me to hire a lawyer to sort any of this out?
The healthcare power of attorney does not, or power of attorney for healthcare. A power of attorney would require a lawyer because that's a legal document that is involved with assets and financial. But a power of attorney for healthcare literally is empowering someone else to make decisions for you in the healthcare realm. That includes admission to a hospital, admission to a mental health hospital, discharge from a hospital, access to your medical records. That's the kind of power that a healthcare power of attorney versus a power of attorney which gives financial and asset ability.
Yeah. So maybe not getting like too nitty gritty into numbers unless you have statistics, but do you have a guesstimate of how many people you see already have this in place versus people who don't?
Well, that's why the initiative, because there's only about 20% of the people have a power of attorney for health care.
Wow.
And so that leaves 80% of the people who are at risk for critical illness or at risk for an emergency, who kind of are by default allowing other people to make decisions for them and kind of giving that power away.
And so what would you say to somebody who's maybe been putting this off, who thinks, oh, that's not me, I don't need that, or maybe someone who's even not as close to what we would deem end of life, maybe someone in their 30s, 40s?
I would say the first place to start is to think about all the things involved with your life, your lifespan, your longevity. We all watch TV, and most people have seen some kind of craziness on TV with emergency and that kind of stuff. And the thing of it is put yourself in that position and think about where you want to be, all the long-term effects, and who is important to you and what's important to you. Kind of prioritize making those choices of quality of life and things that are important, and how this illness is going to affect you. And I think you really have to stop and spend some time by yourself thinking about what you would want and how you would want that to happen. Mm-hmm. And I would encourage anyone, regardless of their age, to have a power of attorney for healthcare in their file, any healthcare system, whether it's Carle or Sarah Bush, wherever you go, and then to have those conversations with your physician. They can only enable the best care for you the more that you communicate with them.
Right, they can't read your mind.
No.
Not mind readers. Are you able to give us maybe a for instance, as you're talking about trying to weigh out quality of life, where somebody would really be affected by maybe having not made this decision and not speaking up?
Well, of course, as a healthcare team, our emergency responders who do wonderful, they are going to respond, and they have all kinds of emergency response, CPR, intubation, ventilator. Sometimes when there's brain death, then you need a feeding tube, and so you need long-term extended care. But the secret is your brain telling your body to function. And that's where it gets tough, because if your brain's not telling your body to function, you are not able to tell your body to function or to make those decisions. And that's where it gets to be very difficult, and very difficult for your family or your friends who are there as your support, because that ultimately, that decision falls to them.
Mm-hmm. So how do I go about getting this paperwork from my desk? I've signed it and I'm ready to turn it in. How do I make sure that the appropriate people have it and see it?
You should turn it and make copies of it the people that should have it should be the people that you list as your agents, mm-hmm. so that they know specifically what you would want. You should have that discussion with your provider just to know, and you should turn it in at Carle or at Sarah Bush, any healthcare system that you're going to be involved in. Because with the electronic medical record, that document is easily accessible, viewable online. So usually in a critical situation, the patient arrives before their family does. And so emergency measures are going to be the first thing that the emergency team is going to do. Mm-hmm. And if that document is there, then that tells us who we should access. And then sometimes it tells us, kind of guides what our decision making is for how long with resuscitation and the kinds of things that we would do for that patient.
I'm sorry if it's kind of an oddball question, but let's say something happens and I'm out of town or out of state. How does that information translate? Does it?
If it doesn't actually, but it's easily accessible. We have actually small little cards that our patients can fill out and carry with them that says they have advanced care plans on file at Carle, mm-hmm. and they could call the medical records, they could call and get a copy of those sent, or talk with the primary care doctors. And your agents, the people that you've given a copy of those forms to, would also have a form that they could access. So if you have those on file in the healthcare system, then the healthcare system could access it, and your agents would also be a resource.
Gotcha. I was just curious, because you never know. I mean, you travel and no one ever thinks I'm on vacation. Nothing bad's going to happen. I'm just here to relax. And, you want to make sure you've got all your ducks in a row. We have covered a lot about this topic, but since you are in it and you see it every day now, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think is important to hit on?
Well, I go back to having those discussions and really spending time kind of thinking about your destiny, thinking about where you would be. Some people really struggle with even the thought of talking about an emergency. I mentioned a personal example. My mom was very superstitious, and mm-hmm. she kind of was of the event, if you talked about it, it would happen. And so she didn't want to talk about death or dying or healthcare power of attorney or mm-hmm. any of those things. And so in her case, it was, she actually passed away very quickly. With my dad's case, he was in and out of the hospital several times, and we just had a very difficult situation with him and with the healthcare system. And so we had communicated pretty clearly, and he had communicated, but still sometimes people really struggle with actually making those decisions to allow someone to pass away or not to continue to do all the resuscitative things that are available. So it really is being in touch with your feelings and what you would want is the key, and knowing what you want, and then communicating that with your family and your friends. And then when next time you're in the doctor, talk to them about it. You know, I don't want to be resuscitated, or life is important to me at all costs and I want to be resuscitated. I want CPR and ventilators and feeding tubes. Each patient, it's what you choose. It's not about what we choose, it's what you choose.
Yeah, the ball is in your court to say, and there's no right or wrong. I mean, like you said, you got to do a lot of soul searching and decide what is best for you.
Right.
And hopefully that helps. Maybe if we've got some family members of loved ones who are, you know, at that time kind of thinking about things, that would help put you at ease. That you know, basically take that guilt off. This is what they want, and making sure that you're respecting their wishes. Are there any other instances, or maybe stories or examples of folks just generally that you're able to share where you've been able to have an impact in getting one of these plans in place?
Well, I think I've had a couple of patients that actually we were able to help her to identify. Some people really struggle with identifying someone who they can choose. People are some of our elderly senior citizens are pretty isolated. They've not had children, and they don't have siblings who are still alive, in choosing a healthcare power of attorney. So that's the next thing, is kind of looking at who would be your agent, who you would trust to speak for you. I had a patient who their minister was willing to do that. I had someone who identified a distant cousin. So each person is kind of different, but kind of again, that's part of the soul searching, is who's going to be there for me at 2 a.m. And you know, can I trust them?
So are there ever instances where people don't respect the wishes?
Well, I think what happens is when they don't have a power of attorney for health care in place, then especially in the emergency room when everyone is very stressed out, then people make a lot of emotional decisions. And no one in that situation, especially in an accident or a critical incident, does they really want the person to pass away. You know, they're just in shock. And so in that situation, we all have a tendency to make decisions with our heart, not with our head. And so that's why, you know, at Christmas dinner, the afternoon after, having this discussion to talk about kind of what we've all been thinking about, and get everyone's family involved, all of their family members, because in big families, especially even small families, people have different opinions and different thoughts, things that are very important to them. So identifying what you're passionate about and what's going to make a difference over the long haul.
So in our last couple of minutes here, is it ever too early to have this discussion?
When you're 30, it feels like it.
Yeah.
But none of us know when that decision making will happen. We always would default to the Surrogate Act if a person doesn't have a power of attorney for health care. But the positive is if we've had that discussion and been able to talk through it, then those plans are in place. And to even just think about it and have talked about it is 100% ahead, even if you've not filled out the forms. If you've just thought about it and talked to your spouse, talked to your children, talk to your parents, depending on your age, then at least people know what you were thinking before the critical event occurred.
Right. No wondering here. Is there a cost associated with getting all this set up?
There is not. If you went to a lawyer, which you could actually go to a lawyer to fill out these forms, but if you fill them out through the healthcare system, Carle will do this for anyone, whether you're a Carle patient you would just need to schedule an appointment with an advanced care planning facilitator, and they can go through it with you, and they will not charge you for that, because the benefit is much more important for all parties involved.
And so if I'm someone who's looking to get connected, is there, just go to Carle's website, or is there?
Carle.org
Okay.
is the best place to, there are forms there that you can download and print off. The key again is completing those forms, but make sure that your witnesses are not your family members and not the people you list as your agents. And sometimes that's very confusing, but your witness has to be somebody that literally is watching you to sign, but they're not connected to you financially or have an emotional commitment to you.
Gotcha. Well, we're under a minute. Is there any final words that you want to share about the topic?
Thanks for the opportunity. I just think it's a very important topic.
Oh, of course, of course. We want to make sure that we cover a wide variety, really from the time you're born until this very critical turning point in someone's life. And that's what we're here to do, is educate. And I appreciate you so much, Teresa, for coming in and letting me pick your brain about advanced care planning.
Thanks so much for having us.
Of course. And we want to thank our viewers, of course, for joining us for this episode of Being Well. And we hope to see you next time.
Carle is redefining healthcare around you, innovating new solutions and offering all levels of care when and where you need it. Investing in technology and research to optimize healthcare, Carle, with Health Alliance, is always at the forefront to help you thrive.
For over 50 years, Horizon Health has been keeping you and your family healthy. And although some things have changed, Horizon Health's commitment to meet the ever-changing needs of our community has remained the same. Horizon Health, 50 years strong.
When Sarah Bush Lincoln opened in 1977, it was with the promise to serve the community's healthcare needs. It has grown into a 2-hospital system with nearly 60 clinics that provide trusted, compassionate care.